do men want?
Manifests itself in relationships, and you feel it in relationships, and they can be very powerful spiritually. And if that's what you need, that's what you should go for.
And she said, oh, I'm going to go do a sweat lodge this evening. And I begged her to take me along, and that was about 6 years ago.
Welcome. This is Speaking of Men. You're watching Public Access Television from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm your host, Mike Rivas. Today's special program will be taking a brief look back at over 16 months of programming on men's issues. Our Men's Forum was born on September 19, 1990, as part of the Channel 99 Review. It originally aired as a weekly 30-minute pre-recorded program. Nancy Strickland, our first host, helped get the show on its feet. In this first clip, she's talking with producer Mike Kruchowski about the emotional impact divorce has on men.
The emotions that I heard in those discussions matched almost exactly with the emotions that I was feeling. That loss of control, a feeling that you can't trust the future to be fair to you, that something important will be taken away from you, that you lose your feeling of self-worth. And those are the same feelings that men talk to me about when they describe their loss of their children through divorce, and it's the same emotional reactions that I heard from the women who had been raped.
Another important person who helped us get on our feet was Harper McGowan, our first director. She was directing the day I first appeared on the show to tell about an upcoming men's gathering.
Michael and I have worked together a few times on some projects. We went to a couple of workshops together and thought it would be fun to just create, it's a diverse movement, so we thought it would be fun to just create a focus for people to be able to come and share and have meetings and input. So that's a lot of what this meeting is about on the 12th and 13th of October at the Carpenters Union Hall. That rambles, but...
That's okay. Michael, how is the movement showing up in men's lives today?
There are a lot of support groups for men, self-supporting. There are several therapists in town who have successful practices, just engaging men and men's issues, and men becoming nurturing and starting to define who we are in our own lives.
In November 1990, Marianne Ducot joined us as host, and she continued hosting through February 1991. In this clip from her all-time favorite show, she talks with Chad Perry about a sweat lodge trip in the Manzano Mountains.
The way you're presenting it, this sounds almost to be an environmental kind of
It is.
thing.
It is connected to it, and you know, and it's a good model for respecting the earth, and it's a good model to you know, to be environmentally conscious.
Or how old do you have to be in a sweat lodge? Do they bring babies into sweat lodges?
Yeah, there are ceremonies for a newborn, you know, that once a newborn baby is out in the world, to have a lodge and, you know, kind of a celebration, and bring that infant in between the rounds. There's a lodge is done in 4 rounds, and to bring the baby in between rounds and pass that baby around and cuddle it and then take it back out. And then the next time you'd see that would be when a boy turns 7 years old, for instance. That's considered a real benchmark, that 7th year. and some of the tribes, that's when a child gets to do his or her first lodge is at the age of 7.
Are you saying his or her, but before I thought you had said it was only for men?
No.
Also in November, I made my first appearance as a host when I filled in for Marianne. Carl Muno and Reed Atherton joined me to talk about men's new attitudes about fathering. We thought it would be interesting to see how younger fathers handle fatherhood in comparison to their own fathers.
When I took a childbirth class before Kelsey was born, there were several fathers in the group in the childbirth class. We were going to have a home birth, and so we had an opportunity to start getting involved even before Kelsey was born. And there were at least 3 other fathers out of a group of about 6 couples that would consistently show up. So I think it's happening more and more, that fathers are getting involved.
You were there when your child was born.
Yeah, it wasn't a home birth. Towards the end of my wife's pregnancy, it got a little complicated, and we were advised by our midwives to contact our physician and go ahead and have a hospital birth. But I was there for the whole thing, all 23 hours of it, and it was pretty amazing. Quite a experience, not like anything else I've ever been through.
That's a far cry from waiting in a hospital waiting room for 23 hours or something, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Being there, you bet.
Yeah.
Carl, what do you think about that? How do you feel that fathers are more involved or less involved in America today with their children?
Well, I think on the average, fathers are involved and are interested. I think there are obstacles to them being more involved in their children's life. I think the primary obstacle is their work. I think there are a lot of fathers that work too many hours in a week. The work week was set up to be about 40 hours a week, and there are a lot of fathers that put in 50, 60, sometimes even 70 hours, and they don't get enough time with their children. And the traditional view of women staying at the house and taking care of the kids, and it wasn't the father's job. You know, he can come home, sit in the recliner, and watch TV. I think
that show also marked Mike Kruchowski's first stint as director. By early December, we had switched to an hour-long live phone-in format. One of the important themes of our show has been responsible parenting. Linda Rangel from the ParentCraft organization joined us one day to tell us about its programs.
ParentCraft is all about parenting. We offer quite a wide variety of educational opportunities for parents to increase their parenting skills, their coping skills, and we also offer support groups for parents, whether they be single parents or fathers without custody or fathers with custody. We have a number of support groups that occur throughout the year. We offer classes from September through May, at least 3 a month. We have 1 a month at lunch, which is the Brown Bag Series.
The Brown Bag Series.
Yes.
Now, I heard that somewhere. What, these are classes? The
Yes.
Brown Bag Series?
Yes, we did a survey and found the topics that parents most wanted to know about, and so we have those topics offered in a variety of formats. Each one is facilitated by an expert in that field, and we do offer the Brown Bag lunch forums so that parents who are working can attend those, so it's more available and accessible to them.
Well, that's
Dusty Arrington became our director just in time for our last show of 1990, and he's been with us ever since. Dusty's knowledge and experience have resulted in major improvements over the past year. Although men still face significant discrimination in divorce courts, many more men are gaining custody of their children after divorce. We spoke with one man, Greg Rogers, who was a pioneer, a single father in the early 70s.
How old was she, Greg, when
She was
you...
8 months old when I began raising her.
How did that come about, that you...
Well, my wife and me both were very young at the time, and it was just too much responsibility for my wife at the time, and she couldn't handle it. Basically, she took off, and it was either my responsibility or it was going to be the state's. And at the time I was in the military, and it was unheard of for a man back in '73 to be raising a child, and the company commander did not, want to go along with this at all. And it literally came down to a point where I was given a direct order to turn my daughter's custody of my daughter over to the state of North Carolina at the time.
Really?
I was in the 82nd Airborne Division, and I broke the order and went into the general's office and got everything turned around.
Well,
But,
good for you,
in a lot of ways, I feel like I was a forerunner in this, because there's a lot more men now that are sharing joint custody or becoming single parents too, and I think the trend's going to even grow
Yes.
much more.
I think so. So your daughter was very, very little. Has there been any contact between her and her mom as the years went by?
For several years there was not. Then it was intermittent. The last few years there has been pretty regular. If every 3 months she'll call, and she's seen her at least once a year, twice a year, a couple years ago. Her mother doesn't live in the States, so.
So not.
The men's movement is often seen as a phenomenon of the white middle-class male, so we invited 2 members of Albuquerque's Hispanic community to join us to talk about their perspective of men's issues.
I'm not sure that there's a man's movement in the Hispanic community, but certainly in these days there's a tremendous transition taking place between the roles of the men and the women in the Hispanic family. I think that most probably the women's movement and the men's movement was, as we know it in the mainstream America, was very slow coming to the Hispanic community. But it has come and it has created some tremendous changes. The Hispanic community as a community has faced major changes in the last 15 or 20 years. The lifestyle that I had when I was growing up is practically unheard of anymore.
Yes, when we were all growing up. Are you basically, you brought up an interesting point here. When I used to introduce this show, one of the major things I would say is that that I kind of feel that the men's movement has grown up in response to the women's movement. And since the men's movement, since the women's movement began more also as a white women movement, then I could see how the white men would be responding to it sooner, and that the both Hispanic and black women took longer to get into the movement, so therefore any men's movement would also be a little bit delayed in coming. With that, am I catching what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. I think probably the women's movement was more.
Over the past decade, more and more men are becoming fathers later in life. Much of the stigma of being an older father has dissipated. We asked Nath Hamilton, a new father in his 50s, to tell us how he views this development.
Well, actually, as I said, I never really thought much about it until you came up and started talking about this. But my father, he had like 3 families. He was an older man when he had my baby brother. My baby brother's 12 years younger than I am, so there was quite a gap in that family, and it didn't really strike me as anything out of the ordinary, because there is such a wide range. There's my mother had 3 children, then 10 years later she had 2 more, and then 10 years later she had another one. So we're strung out over quite a period of time, and my folks were. My mother was rather, I don't remember exactly how old she was, but I think she was in about her 40s when she had the baby, my baby brother. So we never really thought, a great deal about it. It just happened, and there it was.
I guess it helps what your experience has been in life if you grew up in a family.
That's why I said, it was no big, it was no big thing. The thing that came up so funny is when we was in the hospital. All these, me and my wife went in to have the baby, or she went in to have, we went in to have the baby, and all these young kids, was around there having babies, and we were there gray-headed, and that's when it really came home. You look around here everyone looks at you, you know, kind of funny. And you know, you go somewhere and someone will say, you know, your grandchild, and you know, the kid looks up and says, "Daddy," you know, and people look kind of funny, and you know, so it's really funny. I mean, you know, it's humorous to see how people react to you, you know, because they.
One of my all-time favorite shows was our interview with Dr. Lionel Corbett, a Jungian psychologist from Santa Fe. Dr. Corbett had many intriguing thoughts on the current direction of the men's movement.
Sure that it's a good idea to make too much of a split between men and women in terms of the kind of problems that we're facing.
What would be some problems that both men and women are facing tonight in Brookings?
Well, we have all the usual social and psychological problems that everyone knows about. The difficulty, I think, with the men's movement is that they might be trying to attribute it to very specific causes that are not limited to men, that are not confined to men, that women have as well. And so the men's movement says that the problem is that if we make a different diagnosis, we'll come up with a different treatment. Mm-hmm. And if you think that the problem is that we don't have enough access to the deep masculine or the mature masculine or the authentic masculine, that'll take us on a way of thinking and a way of trying to solve the problem that would be different than if we looked at the reason for our problems in a different direction. Mm-hmm. The difficulty is that we're really not sure what the deep masculine is or what the authentic or mature masculine really is, because so much of that is culture bound. We have a tendency I mean, they say that the problem of modern men is that they're uninitiated and that they're like boys, that they're too passive, that they can't show a sword, they can't be fierce, mm-hmm. they can't be assertive when they need to be, that they're abusive, that they're looking for dominance. All these are this is like the diagnosis of men nowadays. This is supposed to be the kind of problem that they have. But all these things are problems that many women have as well. There's nothing particularly male or masculine about this. These are human problems. And we know a certain amount about how these things arise developmentally in childhood. We know that there are certain problems. If you don't have the right kind of childhood environment, let's say your assertiveness or your aggression is not allowed in the family, somebody screams at you or yells at you, then you might grow up and you can't access that. Mm-hmm. Well, it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman, that's a problem, because there are times when you need to be able to access it. So you know, we don't want to call that specifically masculine when it's really a common problem.
Right.
Masculinity had to do with being assertive and knowing what you want and going for it and being fierce and all that kind of stuff. These are just stereotypes. There's no indication that these are anything other than political demands that have been made on men and women, really through the use of power. There's no reason that these things can't be reclaimed. There's no reason why when a man is being nurturing and receptive and taking care of a child, that we have to call that his femininity. There's nothing to say that a man can't have an authentic masculine nurturing capacity. Mm-hmm. And there's no need when a woman is being assertive or even aggressive, there's no need to call that her masculinity. There's no reason why there can't be an authentic feminine assertiveness that has nothing to do with masculinity. This is just perpetuating old stereotypes.
Well, now I think
that program marked my first appearance as the full-time host of the Channel 99 Review. Dr. David Lindfest, author of Men Speak Out and the Heart of Masculine Recovery, had attended a men's gathering with me the previous year, so we invited him to tell us about his book on our next program. Here's what he had to say.
It's Shepard's observation, and many other people's as well, particularly Diane Fassel's, that men can be addicted to work in the same way that they're addicted to either alcohol or drugs. And work can perform the same function in their lives of blocking a lot of carried pain that has been carried forward from childhood and gets masked either through the use of alcohol or through working 12-hour days or 16-hour days.
Over the past 2 or 3 decades, as feminists worked for women's rights, men were increasingly portrayed as the sole cause of many of women's problems. Eventually, the issues of guilt and shame became paramount for men. We asked Mark Farragle to join us to talk about men and shame.
Most of us in today's culture have absent fathers, Either he's absent through work, he's absent through divorce, he's absent through alcohol, or he's just absent from his own body.
Emotionally.
Emotionally, he's
Sure.
absent.
Sure.
So we men are having a real hard time not trying to learn how to get into our bodies and be male within that body. So in that emptiness, you know, when I say, what is a man, and I'm trying to find it in my body, I don't find much. And that turns into shame. Especially when you have some very angry people saying this is what men are, and this is what men are, and this is what men are. When I go to check it out, it's like, well, you know, I don't have an argument here.
Spirituality has been a central issue in American life. Not surprisingly, spiritual growth also became a central issue in the men's movement. Chad Perry, who had appeared on an earlier show, joined us once again to discuss that important aspect of men's lives.
He had run across some native people, and they had taught him how to do sweat lodges, and he'd never had a good relationship with his son. And they started doing sweats together. And he said, you know, my son was always, well, he was always kind of the wimpy kid in the class and this kind of thing. And now he feels real strong about himself, you know, and he's always willing to do things, and we do a lot of things together. And, you know, there's an example of where the father and the son have connected in sacred space, and, you know, the father did not reject the son. In fact, they've got this really strong bond, and they're both blessed by God in that space. So, you know, I think there's a lot of truth to that statement that you can be spurned by your parents, but that whole idea of seeking God can make you strong.
You bet, you bet. And I can't think, Philip Glass did the music for it. I can't think of the person who did the film. Koyaanisqatsi, which was the Hopi word for life out of balance, which it seems that we are spiritually out of balance in America on a lot of levels. Public access television provides an excellent opportunity for education on important social concerns. Today, one of those concerns for both men and women is the matter of reproductive responsibility. We were fortunate to have Tim Lopez of Planned Parenthood join us on one show for a discussion of men's responsibilities. I think it's just an absolutely great poster.
And exactly, because I do use this poster in most of my classes, and it says, would you be more careful if it was you that got pregnant? And I tell these to the young teenage males. And their response is, well, of course. You know, I think I would be more careful if it was me that got pregnant. And I put it into them a situation where they have to really think about being careful when they are sexually active. It's this kind of stereotypes that the males and females have grown up with. But in the 1990s, men have to be more conscious of their behaviors. They have to be more conscious in practicing using birth control and using contraceptives, and also learning how to communicate and break down these barriers that men.
Our first Father's Day program was a turning point, even though we didn't know it at the time. After that program, we concluded that the phone calls simply weren't accomplishing what we had hoped.
Fatherhood, are you a dad?
Yeah, I have 10 children.
That's an awful lot. Gee, are you
Well, I was busy in my youth.
busy in your youth? Okay, well, what do you think about fatherhood? You have any?
Well, I don't want to talk about fatherhood. I want to know who dressed you this evening.
Well, actually, my wife's away, and I get to wear whatever I want. And my wardrobe consists.
Does your wife dress you any better?
No, she bought me these.
Oh, okay. Well, that's all I had to ask.
Thanks for calling.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You have a phone call?
We got a phone call. Thank you for calling.
Hello. This is Ruth. How are you this evening?
We're okay. How are you?
Well, I was better before I started watching this program. And it seems to me that I'm not sure if I'm really clear on the concept here, but are you saying that this is a program that is devoted to the fact that men are having a lot of trouble getting along in the world? I'm not clear here.
That's certainly one of the objectives.
I think men and women both are having a lot of trouble getting along in the world.
Yes, but this has to do with men's issues. It seems to me that men are already running the world. Men already have control over women to an enormous extent. Men already make enormous amounts of money. And from what I heard a little bit about divorce courts being more equitable or something, now to top it all off, you want to take our children away from us too? Am I understanding this?
Did you at any point say you wanted to take children away from their
Not
mothers,
at all.
Michael?
And I think that
personally, sir, who are wearing a hat on television that I find, as far as I'm concerned, is extremely impolite. I've only
Tip
seen
your
it in
hat
New
to the
Mexico
ladies, son.
for men to wear hats indoors. It's certainly a lack of respect for everybody, and seems to be part of New Mexican culture. And however, you do appear to want to be taken seriously despite your dress. And it seems to me that I don't...
We decided to have one last live show before completely revamping our format.
the comments that Ruth made was, you white men, have oppressed women for...
Pink men.
Pink men. For thousands of years, and now you want to take away our children. And that was in response to a comment that I made that I felt that men ought to, as a sort of as an equal opportunity or affirmative action, ought to get custody of the children in divorces 50% of the time. And Ruth thought that I wanted to take away her children. So, do you remember that comment?
I remember that comment. I think what I remember most of is the amount of anger and hostility that I felt coming, and I also got the definite impression that she didn't hear a word we were saying.
Well,
it seemed. We hope you enjoyed these few highlights from our earlier shows on the Channel 99 Review. Join us next week as we look at some of our earlier shows from Speaking of Men. Thanks for watching and for all the encouraging comments. This is Mike Rivas reminding you to stand if you can, run if you have to, but don't quit.